Good morning, girls. Hope you're all doing good. So, welcome back to the economics class. Before we move on to the next topic of the same chapter, the first chapter that we are doing, I would like to recap on what we had studied in the previous class. So, shall we recap? Hope you all remember the concepts that we learned in the last class. Do you all? Okay, so the first thing that we learned in the last class was about the India's economic condition during colonial rule. Then economic policies pursued during the colonial rule. India's agricultural sector prior to the colonial rule. So what happened during the colonial rule, how the agriculture improved or declined? So do you think it improved or declined? Yes, it did decline. Agriculture sector during the colonial rule. And then under this, there were systems that were introduced. Those were the zamindari system and the revenue system. These two systems, introduced by the colonial government, made a major change in agriculture by decline of agricultural growth. Then comes the commercialization. What is commercialization? So there were few students who had few doubts about commercialization, that they did not understand the concept of commercialization. So basically, commercialization is a state where the farmers or the agriculturist or the agricultural sector, they started to grow more of cash crop in with the view of improving the commercialization, like for export and import of goods and services. The intention was to increase the agricultural sector or to develop the agricultural sector, which did not happen during the colonial government, because the colonial government never supported or never wanted the Indian agricultural sector to even have any improvement. You can tell all these things by looking that the agricultural sector did not get ample investment to be having good fertilizers, water supply, irrigational facility. So you can see so how well it was encouraged. You could see on that basis, you can always understand that the colonial government never wanted the agricultural sector to improve, until and unless they just wanted certain crops to be improved, so that they could be benefited by that, and they could carry all those crops to their home country for their betterment, not for the our country, the India, not for India to have a better sector. Okay, girls. Now, moving on to the next slide, it's about industrial sector. Now, we have previously studied about agricultural sector, and now we are moving on to the industrial sector. Here, during this phase, industrial sector during eve of colonial rule. Again, you need to understand how industrial sector was motivated or pushed down, or whether any changes in this sector. So how we shall see, Indian industrial sector was also crying off for the development in the colonial rule, like agriculture. No importance was given for the development of industries. So, how agriculture faced the trouble, the same way industries too had the same consequence. The state of Indian industrial sector on the eve of independence was as follows. Reduced Indian It reduced India to the status of a mere exporter of prime raw materials for the major industries in Britain. So their only intention for industrial sector was for the India, whatever the raw materials it produced, India was supposed to only export the raw materials and nothing to do with that. There were no exports to other countries. They were exporting only to Britain, and Britain had various industries. So what these raw materials were exported to Britain, and over there they used to manufacture and make a final product, and then what they did we'll see in the next point, to turn India into a sprawling market for the finished products of those industries. So, India too had its own products, isn't it? So, whatever India had its products, it did not have any value in front of the products that were finished and tried to be sold in the Indian markets. The Britain had its own products, and those products wanted to come down to India and take the place of Indian market, because those products were sold at the cost of at the lowest cost of the Indian products. I hope you're understanding, girls. I will repeat it once again. For India, the products, the India, okay, you all know that India was the best for its craftsmanship, handicrafts, all its products which were produced was it was framed or it was made in its best, best way. Okay, so that particular product had one particular price. Now this price was higher when it was compared to the Britishers products, because the Britishers, they tried to sell their finished products in Indian market at a low price, pushing down the Indian products to a corner, so that people, the Indian, bought the Britain's product at a lower price. Indians, our own people, thought that buying Britain products were much cheaper than the Indian products. So that particular period made the Indian craftsmen or the Indian, authenticated craftsmanship went down. It started to decline. So you can understand that the sprawling market for the finished products of those industries went down. Okay, we'll move on to the next. So before independence, Indian industry was totally destroyed by the Britishers. So what were the impact of the colonial policies? So these were the two policies that we saw, right? So firstly, what was the policy? For yes, come on, girls, I want you to recall what was the previous slide. It says that the India was treated as the mere raw material suppliers. So they were only supposed to supply. And when it comes to the market, they were the sprawling market. So the entire market would turn to the Britain products. So we'll see what were the impact on the colonial policies. Decline of the indigenous handicraft industry. So, as I said, the indigenous handicrafts went down because of the Britishers' products. Massive unemployment in the country. There were massive people did not have any work. They were jobless. A market which was now deprived of the supply of locally made goods. So locally made goods did not have any value in front of the products made by the supplied by the Britain. Moving on to the next, low standard of living. So you can all understand that with the impact of all these above points, say decline of indigenous handicraft, massive unemployment, then the deprived market, will all lead to low standard of living. Girls, do you think if you do not have a salary of about 2 to 3 months, do you think your standard of living will be the same as how it used to be? No, right? You will start cutting down your expenses, isn't it? That is called as standard of living. Standard of living is nothing but your day to day expenses, how you spend, how you, lead your life is the standard of living. Basic standard of living is you are comfortable enough with 3 meals of food and with a good shelter, isn't it, girls? So when all this weather criteria, it became a big problem. Okay, there is no proper job, there is no proper money, then there is a lot of unemployment, there's no market for your products that you're producing in your own country, in your own market. Then what happens? Your standard of living will come down. Okay, girls, I hope I'm clear on this point. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So, the second half of the 19th century saw a little progress in the industrial development. So, slightly, India started to see a slight change. There were a little progress in the industrial sector. So, what were the progress and which part of the industry had a progress? But the pace was very slow, okay, and was confined to certain sectors only. So it did not grow rapidly. There were no rapid change or rapid development in the industrial sector, and it did not impact on all the sectors of industry. Only particular sectors of industry had a slight growth or progression in its development. So, which were the sectors? So, they were jute and cotton textile mills were the first ones. So, why all these were? Again, you need to just understand, girls. Britishers try to impose on certain industry, they try to improve certain industry only for their benefit. They were very selfish. They wanted their work to be done. So they know that India had its best cotton, best jute, and all the raw materials which were produced. Which raw materials they did not have? Those raw materials were made, in abundant. So they try to push the jute and cotton textile industries to improve so that they could manufacture more and more in India, and they could sell them to other different countries and make good amount of profit. So that was the main intention of the Britishers. Then later, paper, sugar, cement, etc. were set up. So these industry, paper industry, the sugar industry, India had plenty of sugarcane fields. So they had lot of sugarcane, crops. So what do you get? There were a lot of byproducts of sugarcane, isn't it? The first thing was sugar and goes on jaggery and all those things. So they started to focus on all this, which will give you more profit. Cement. Cement again, they started manufacturing more and they started to boost these industry with some kind of, helping. Okay, you have to improve little investment and they would try to make them improve. And that's how they used to get some kind of profit out of it. Then the major development came in the form of Tata Iron and Steel Company in 1907. So this was introduced in this year, that is 1907. TISCO, which is also called as TISCO, that is Tata Iron and Steel Company. So what are all this used for, girls? Iron and steel, they are used for building, manufacturing and various other things. So it started to inculcate. There were a lot of building, manufacturing happening. So this company at this particular point when it was introduced, it was a boom period. Okay, however, there were hardly any capital goods industry to promote further industrialization of India. Okay, now you have seen a new word, capital goods, isn't it? So now I want you to send me a WhatsApp message by 10 o'clock. Yes, in the group economics A, C, and E. I want to see you all texting me with your name and your section. Okay, let me be very clear with your name and section. I want the meaning of capital goods. So I want you people to send the message by 10 o'clock. Am I clear? Let's move on to the next slide. So I hope you all have a proper understanding about this concept. Okay, further we will move on to the next slide, which talks about foreign trade. Girls, what do you understand by foreign trade? So far we did industrial sector, now we are talking about the foreign trade. Whatever the country manufactures or produces has to be transported. Anything that is being made in excess or produced in excess will be exported, isn't it? Wherein India, being the best with its raw materials and being best at its manufacturing, had lot of opportunities to be exported to different countries. But this part of trade also had lot of issues with the colonial government being in India. So how India faced to overcome the foreign trade with the colonial government. So we shall see about it. Okay, India's foreign trade goes back to ancient times. It used to be one of the most important trading company. So it was not that the colonial government came into India and that is how India started to know uh, to export or import. It was before the colonial government, India knew how to export its items. In the colonial period, India's foreign trade was restricted to British only. So now you people understand how the government imposed the Indian foreign trade to be supplied only to Britain and not to any other country. See, again, they had monopoly over Indian exports and imports. So they had the command, no, you should supply only to our country, only to my country, that friend of my country. So they had certain obligations that you should do, you should obey to all these kind of rules and regulations. Only then the foreign trade was smooth. Only then the Indian industrials or manufacturing units were allowed to work smoothly. Understood, girls? So India was allowed to trade with only few neighboring countries. So as per their choice and will, India had options to supply the or export goods only to those countries where Britain would allow them to. Import of invisible items, all of which led to the drain of Indian wealth. So you never know what were the things that the Britain government wanted to get from other countries. It was never known to the Indians. So all of which it started to drain the Indian wealth. They would export something and in return they would take something else. So we don't know what they did, but we knew only that they were exploiting the Indian all natural resources, raw materials, and all the exports of finished products. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So that was about the foreign trade. I hope I am clear about the foreign trade. Girls, again, if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. Message me. Please do not call me. Message me between 10 to 4. You please finish all your classes up to 12. Only after that till 4 o'clock you're all allowed to message me. You can ask me. Okay, I'll be able to reply to you. Now moving on to the demographic condition. Girls, what do you understand by demography? So demography is a study of population. How many birth, how many death, how many, what's the mortality rate of the human population in that particular area, or in a country, or in a city. So that is called as a demographic condition. Okay, so this is the quantitative study. Quantitative in the sense it is in the form of numbers. You'll be studying in the form of numbers. The study of human populations, births, aging, deaths, migration. Okay, how many of you are in India? How many of you left from India to another country? So all this come under the demography. So now when it comes to demography, I want you people to give you, I want you all to understand, or I want you to be integrated with the current situation. So now we all know that we are all going through a pandemic, isn't it, girls? So what is it? It is COVID-19, which is coronavirus, and it is it is impacted on the economy so badly that we, the Indians, so many countries in the world, okay, India being the second largest country with the increase in number of coronavirus patients. So what are we seeing in that? Increase in number of death, isn't it? And girls, to be very precise, this year you can see the number of birth rates have come down comparatively to the previous years. Why is that? People are scared. This disease has impacted so badly that there is the rate of giving birth, or even planning to have a child is going down, and people have stopped migrating from India to another country. But the Indians who are from in other countries, they are all coming back to India. But again, this is becoming more challenging to our country, isn't it, girls? The whole world is facing with a demographic condition which is highly varying in this particular state of COVID-19, isn't it? So I'm just giving you an example. It is an You need to integrate yourself to a real life situation always. Whatever you study, girls, just compare that to what is happening around you. Economics is a subject where you need to understand, compare, analyze with the current situation rather than imagine. It is not a fairy tale, it is what is happening around you. Okay, with this context, we'll move on to the next slide. So, what is demographic condition? You have understood. Now, we shall see it. Details about the population of British India. British India is nothing but during the British rule, how the population of Indians, okay, that is the meaning of British India. The population during the British rule of India were first collected through a census in 1881. Okay, census was something which was introduced then. Okay, so what is census? Census is, again, it's a way you collect information going door to door, knowing from each individual how many members are there in the house, how many girl child, how many boy child, how many adult, how many women, how many men. So all these things are try to understand, like, it could be the statistical data could be collected through census. So this census revealed the unevenness in India's population growth. So whatever India's accurate growth or decline rate was to be understood with this help, or it helped the census. Census helped the demographic graphing being simple. Such census was conducted every 10 years. So every 10 years the census was conducted to have a precise demographic situation or a condition of the country. So 1921 is said to be the pivot year, but about which demographic transition of India took place. Before 1921, India was in first stage of demographic transition. So that was a situation where demography became something big criteria to be understood by each and every individual, and it became a necessity for the country's economic growth. After 1921, second stage of transition began. So again, every 10 years the census was conducted. So after 10 years, the second transition also began. Okay, so this was the demographic condition during the British rule. So I hope this is clear to you. Girls, I want you to be very, very much attentive during the session, because every session, what I tell, I might conduct an online oral test. Be prepared with the points that I've been talking to you about in the presentation. So please be wise, be honest with what I am teaching, and be attentive. Is that clear, girls? Okay. Now we shall study about poor social development indicators. So, what were the points that helped us understand where the economy had issues? What were the indicators? So, the overall literacy level was less than 16%. So, hope you all know what do you mean by literacy or literate. Literate is nothing but a person who's educated. The number of educated people is called as literacy. Okay, literacy level was less than 16%. Imagine, less than 16%, wherein comparatively today, for it cannot be compared to the current situation, isn't it, girls? Whereas 16%, very, very minute population was able to be educated, which was not at all in, the right way of economic development. So that is why it says the poor social development. Next, out of this, the female literacy level was at a negligible low of about 7%. So amongst the 16%, 7% were only girls. So you can understand how the girl child were, encouraged to go out and study. Do you think it's the same situation now? Do your parents say you people, girls, don't study? It's not that, right? We are now highly women empowered, isn't it, girls? All, all, there's no difference between a girl and a boy, isn't it? So everyone needs to be educated, no matter it is boy or a girl. Education is equal to everyone, right? So then, public healthcare facilities were either unavailable to a large segment of the Indian population, or if available, were highly inadequate. Again, the facility of hospitals, the facility of hygiene was very limited. There were a lot of different types of diseases, and which did not have a proper medication. And if you need to go to a doctor, visit a doctor, get a treatment done, you'll either have to wait for days for a doctor to arrive to a village or your house. Those days, doctors, it used to be like either a doctor would come every week to your city or your town, whichever place. Usually they would call it as a village, and doctors would come and visit once in a while or once in 15 days. And that particular day, or maybe half a day, whoever were sick, okay, they were able to go approach the doctor and get the treatment done. If the doctor was genuine enough, he would give you a better treatment. If he is, just like, the colonial government, then it would be really challenging for the people. Okay, so you can understand, look at this, how the education rate used to be during the colonial rule. And food hygiene was the biggest task and biggest challenge to all the population. Okay, girls. So, moving on to the next slide. So, there were water and airborne diseases were rampant and took a huge toll on life. So there were diseases, as I said, due to lack of knowledge about hygiene and basic qualities of medicines and healthcare. People did not know how to take care of themselves, and due to this, there were a lot of unhygiene environment around, and that led to water diseases like cholera was more, and airborne diseases. So now that you know COVID, girls, COVID is not a new disease. Coronavirus is not at all a new disease. This happened few years back. I can say during the British rule, it had happened way then. So that time when people fought all together, we can do that now also. The same precautions were taken what now people are taking. They used to cover themselves with a cloth. They used to wear gloves to the hands and move around. There were a lot of things you can just google and find out when was this coronavirus invented, or when it was seen in the era. Okay, you can go back and you can see there was I still remember the picture scene. I think in the initial days when we heard about coronavirus, there were pictures circulated in Google about how people during those days faced the challenges in spite of not having any sanitizers, how people overcame all those things. Now, the same thing happened during the colonial rule, and it took a major turn for Indian economy because there were a lot of death rate increasing. Children had no immune to support their life, so they started losing life, and the demographic level of our economy started to decline. Infant mortality rate was quite alarming, about 218, I'm sorry, 218 per thousand. So amongst 1000 births there were 218 deaths of infants. So you can imagine how poor it was, how unhygiene situation it was. Life expectancy was low as 44 years. So that was the major, maximum age one could live. And moving on to further age, either they would have some kind of disease or any kind of issues, and that's how they would lose their life. Extensive poverty prevailed in India at that time. Understood, girls? So, we will do a quick recap on what we studied today. We studied industrial sector during eve of colonial rule, then impact of colonial policies. Then we studied about the foreign sector, how the colonial government tried to impose rules on our country to supply goods to different countries, and how they controlled India to export or import to the countries. So they always wanted India to supply raw materials only to their preferable countries, not to the countries where India could benefit from. Demographic condition during the colonial rule, poor social development indicators. Okay, girls, for today I'll be stopping here. We have furthermore topics in the same chapter. So far, whatever I have explained, I want you all to make a note of it in your classwork. Please do not question me on WhatsApp saying, "Ma'am, should we write all these things? Ma'am, should we answer to the question that you have asked?" Please, girls, don't ask such kind of questions. I want you people to understand the basic concept what I have taught you. You need to make a note of it in your classwork, and then I will send you a PDF format wherein you will have some more points and questions along with that. So please make a note of it. Questions have to be answered by taking the help of the contents that I have given to you in this presentation. Am I clear, girls? I hope I am clear. If I am not clear, please get back to me. I will explain it to you. Okay? Is that okay? And please keep revising so far what I have taught you all. Okay? Thank you, girls. Have a nice day.